Bonjour, Matthew. Look, that's the extent of my French, but we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about Super Rugby, and we're finally here at the pointy end. The finals, 4 teams are out. Matty Toomua joins me. Matt, welcome to the Raw Rugby podcast.
Yeah, thanks, Christy. It is exciting, and I feel like I'm getting the hang of things. I actually tipped 7 from 7 last week, whereas I think it's a better start than 1 from 7 in round 1. So, some teams have been on the up, but I feel like my punditry has been improving as well. So that's exciting.
I think there's already one glaring mistake there. It's the fact that there's 6 games in this regular competition.
See, and I wanted to check that with you because obviously Super 14. So I've got one wrong. I don't know where I got the extra game from. Where did I get the extra game from?
Let's talk about maybe it's the Aussie Sevens.
Oh,
the women.
God, who knows? There's enough games on the weekend.
You're not wrong, but look, there's heaps to chew the fat about in this edition. Look, there's the first insights into Joe Schmidt's Wallaby squad, a wider training squad that's been announced, a couple of curveballs, a few selection surprises with those that aren't there. And as I've just alluded as well, the Aussie women, absolutely marvellous at the Madrid Sevens to come away with the gold medal there and have so much momentum leading into the Olympics in about 6 weeks' time. All that on the other side of this. So, Matty, it's a big day for you, mate. You spent a bit of time behind the coffee machine today, right?
Yeah. Today was Monday when we're recording this, and it was my first day back in the cafes. So I was actually at a coffee roaster, so learning how to roast. But I was bagging for ages and getting it all together, and I think I've actually got some little cuts on my fingers, so I might have to strap them tomorrow. But I don't know if that's frowned upon. But we'll see how it goes.
It's a proper day's work, mate. Is this the first time you've ever
done it? My first
one?
No, yeah, I think it is. I've done a few barista shifts here and there, but this is the first one kind of actually, getting stuck in. But hey, it's good to talk rugby though, because at the end of the day, that's what we love. And yeah, some exciting things coming up.
So 2 before 10 is your cafe of choice.
It is. Everyone go
in Canberra. Surely anyone that goes there that's a loyal listener of the Raw Rugby podcast would get a free espresso, right?
I'd be happy to do that, no problem. They have to pay for milk, though. They have to pay for milk. So,
look, you're right. It is a good time to talk about rugby, and it's great that we're finally at the quarterfinals. I know that last year there was so much attention. Every match felt like there was more jeopardy on the line because it's a World Cup year, and you're talking selection all the time. But now that we're at the quarterfinals, we've really got probably the best 8 sides, the 8 sides that deserve to be there. And we talk about that. The Rebels, they go into the finals having lost 6 straight. That's not necessarily how they want to enter it with the lack of momentum, but they've actually shown a fair bit at times. And they had a winning run of 3 on the trot. It's not going to be easy for them against the Hurricanes. So we'll leave. These are the 4 quarterfinals. The Reds and Chiefs on Friday night, Waikato follows it up with 3 outstanding quarters on Saturday with the Canes up against the Rebels, 1st versus 8. The Blues, having not quite done enough to get a bonus point victory over the last week against the Chiefs, they finished in 2nd, and they will host the Fiji Drua. And then the Brumbies, who were 3rd to host the Highlanders. 3 pretty exciting games. They're 4 across the weekend. Yeah. Are you happy with the quarterfinals there?
Yeah. Look, and I think, to be fair, there's probably 2 games that probably stick out with the first and last. It's bookended. I think the Hurricanes at home, earning that home ground advantage, they'll be very tough to beat. Although the Rebels have shown. I think, yes, they've lost a few on the bounce, but all things being equal, the draw was very much favoured at the start of the year, and they got that done. So I think they should be extremely proud of that. And, and gosh, I can't imagine what it was like boarding a plane on Friday, or when was it, Thursday, after being told that, they're essentially out of a job the year out next year. So, and fair play to them. The Rebels started really well against the Drua, which is usually half the battle over there. You know, the Drua usually come out firing, and for the Rebels to be leading at various stages in that game was really good. But yeah, look, really, really exciting. I think the first day, I think the Reds might be a chance against the Chiefs. I think they've got a bit of history over there. They've got a bit of history against the Chiefs. So I think, I'll potentially, hopefully see a boil over in that first game.
Yeah, that game there, like the fact that it's the repeat of last year's quarterfinal, the Reds actually really tested the Chiefs for the first 65, 70 minutes last year in that quarter. It was a day game. This is slightly different. It's going to be an evening one in Waikato, but you have to give them a chance, don't you? Because they beat the Chiefs earlier this year. Outstanding match in Brisbane, and then they beat them last year as well. I think it was in New Plymouth from memory. A fine display, so they know how to get the job done. And sometimes it's like it doesn't seem like it should make sense, but there are like bogey sides or sides that do test you a little bit more than others, right?
Definitely, and you think of like cricket, people say like, you know, you've got another guy's number, you know, he's your bunny or whatever, and it's by no means that. But I think the Reds look, you know, they would have looked at the draw and gone, okay, you know, we didn't finish top 4. Who do we have out of Brumbies, out of Hurricanes and Blues away? I think they would have chosen the Chiefs away. I think that would have been their most favoured. That doesn't mean they're going to win it, but they've got history against the Chiefs. They've beaten them this year. They've beaten them in New Plymouth, and they're a better team than they were last year, in my view. So I think they go there with a lot of guys who have played in knockout matches in New Zealand, and I think they go there with a little bit of momentum. The Chiefs have been, you know, I thought at the start of the year they were probably the team to beat. They've kind of meandered a little bit. They've got a lot of experience. Obviously, Damien McKenzie heading that up. You know, they've got a lot of experience, and they won't be taken lightly. But I think the Queenslanders will go there quite confident.
I completely agree. The thing that concerned me about the Chiefs this year was the forward pack. When you're losing Sam Cane and Brody Retallick and Peter Gus Solakula, these aren't guys that you can just replace instantly, are they? Like they are test match players. Some of them are once in a generation players, like your Brody Retallicks. He's just been at the heart of the All Blacks for the last decade. So yeah, you've got to win games up front, and particularly in knockout matches. So you're right. I don't think they'll be intimidated going over there, and that's half the battle. I think going to New Zealand is thinking and believing that you're in with a chance. They've just got to do all the right things, you know, to kick their goals. They've got to be so accurate at the breakdown, and they've got to be able to slow the Chiefs' breakdown down, because that back line that the Chiefs have is so electric. It's not funny.
It is, and there aren't, like, you know, it's the old adage. It's one up front, and the Chiefs at the start of the year, they looked amazing because they kind of won that battle, that kind of physical battle, and they were allowed to play their little trigger balls. Mackenzie nice and flat, Leonard Brown flat. As the season's probably progressed, teams have realised that, you know, the way to stop them is kind of up front and stop them playing off front football, and they've looked different. They're still extremely dangerous when they've got that momentum. They're extremely hard to stop. But you know, you saw moments even on the weekend at Eden Park. They would hold the ball for long periods of phases, but they wouldn't go anywhere if the contact was won by the Blues. So yeah, look, this is, you know, I'm being very optimistic in my thinking here, but I do think that the Reds have. I think this is a better Reds team. I think their strengths up front are really, really good. You know, you think of their maul, you think of their scrum. These are big parts of the games, particularly in knockout matches that matter. And for the Reds to be strong up there, I think that'll hold them in good stead.
So the Reds coming off the back of consecutive victories. The last one on Friday night, 27-26 over the Waratahs. It was a pretty extraordinary match, having ran out to a 19-0 lead. It looked like they were going to score again, denied because of a push from Tim Ryan. But then the Waratahs just came storming back in that second half. Some of the guys like Jed Holloway, who we'll get to later on, but rolled up their sleeves. Jack Bowen, I thought, was outstanding on his starting 10 debut. But do you feel like, if you're an outsider looking in, the Waratahs have finished last, are you concerned that the Reds haven't been able to put away the Waratahs, or it doesn't really matter at this point in time because they got across the line and it was a nice penalty from Tom Liner, who missed a pretty easy one, but then nailed one from near the halfway line?
Yeah, look, but they could have lost that game easy as well. The Waratahs had a penalty of their own to clinch the game. Look, I think it's probably just it probably just shows what teams were playing for. I think the Reds, deep down probably had an eye to the week later, and then once they got out to that 19-0 lead, it kind of those voices in your head become a little bit stronger. You go into the game and you go, no, we're going to respect them, blah, 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 blah. But when you race out to such a quick lead, you're only human. And I think that maybe, in a staring contest, they just blinked for a second there. And the Waratahs had a lot to play for. They had a lot of pride on the line, and fair enough to them. And, if you could have given them 10 points at the start of the year, they could have won 5 more games. Who knows? But yeah, unfortunately, it's going to be a season to forget for the Waratahs.
Oh, it's the story of their season, isn't it? So close yet so far, and it can't just be a coincidence that you lose so many by just a couple of points. They haven't been accurate enough all year, and yes, they've come close on a couple of occasions, but yeah, crucial penalties that have been missed and opportunities, but just not quite accurate, I don't think. But yeah, a maiden wooden spoon for them in the wider competition. We know how they struggled in 2021 in the Super Rugby AU. Let's get to the Rebels a little bit and talk about that situation. I imagine as a former Rebel, it would have felt a little bit awkward watching the scenes unfold on Thursday into Friday, where you bought a flight and you've just been told that you're not going to be around any longer. It was the elephant in the room. We'd known about it for many, many months that this was likely to occur, but finally some clarity that Rugby Australia has decided not to hand back the licence to the Rebels. Don't think that the consortium has enough credibility, isn't stable enough, don't have enough answers as to who these people are, what kind of money, the financial security, is it going to be viable, not just next year, but in 5 years' time. So that's the decision that they've made. How do you feel about it now?
Oh, look, it was a weird day because I feel like almost every week you're opening your phone up and you're getting some news alert about the Rebels aren't going to be here next year, and for this to kind of actually be overt that that it is happening, it was devastating. As a club that I care deeply about, and with people there who I know very well, it sucks. From a broader perspective, there's elements that you understand. Look, I honestly don't know what. I don't really know what to say, in the sense that it was a bit heartbreaking. It took me a little while to kind of get over it and kind of process the information. Obviously, as you said, it was the worst kept secret for the whole year, and there was an element of, okay, at least we have clarity now, we can move forward. But then you kind of want to give it its dues, and I obviously the players, but you think of the supporters, and particularly like the volunteers at the club who have been there, who it means a lot more to. As much as I care about the club, I and all the other guys there, we were paid to be there. And whereas there were so many people who have given their time and effort, sacrificed their weekends, who are up late Tuesday and Thursday night at their local club, and for their club to be gone, and that pathway to just be a bit more, not as clear cut now, is heartbreaking, and it sucks. But unfortunately, it just seems every year we keep outdoing ourselves and how low we can go in Australian rugby. And this just felt like one of those moments where you just want to keep your head down a bit.
It doesn't paint a pretty picture about Australian rugby, does it? It's the fact that you're shrinking, you're going back from 5 to 4 for the second time in 6 years since the Force were on the chopping block against the Rebels, pitted against the Rebels in 2017. And then as it turns out, a few years down the track, yes, COVID probably did impact things. But look, I think in many ways, perhaps from a high performance perspective, from a results thing, it'll be interesting to see what happens from a Wallabies perspective. It does, from a cohesion perspective, having 4 sides picking predominantly from 4 rather than 5 help the national team? Does it allow for players to get more confidence because maybe they're winning more because squads are stronger? It's questions a lot of people have been asking for many years. We'll probably get to find that out over the next couple. But it's still just, if you're losing a team from one of the biggest cities in the country, a place like Melbourne, you don't have rugby in there, it doesn't feel like Australian rugby. It tells everything that you need to know about Australian rugby, that it's just struggling financially to support itself in every area.
Yeah, it's tough. Like I remember joining. I started my professional career in 2008, and we'd just been knocked out of the quarterfinals against England. It was in France in 2007, and I remember the feeling going into that. It was like, oh, can it get any lower? Blah blah blah. It was all doom and gloom. And unfortunately, you fast forward 17, 18 years now, and it just, I don't know, it just. It almost, it's hard being a Wallabies fan sometimes, or an Australian rugby fan, because it just seems like blow after blow. But credit to those guys who've kind of stuck at it. But yeah, look, I understand the high performance argument. I completely get it. 4 teams. You look at a team like Ireland. It shows you don't need 12 teams like, say, in England, or 14 teams in France. There are various ways of doing that, and we are prioritizing the national game, and we can't afford this anymore. It just sucks that it's had to get to this point. And unfortunately, it's, when decisions were made, to grow the game or whatever, and then it was evident that these were mistakes. The people who were responsible for them, they're 3 years out the door now, and then in comes a new guy, and the accountability is a bit like, oh, but it was his fault. He did this. It was Eddie. It was Hamish. It was, John. It was all these other people's fault, and it just kind of keeps getting pushed aside, and we just, we lose that kind of long-term planning, which is, yeah, it sucks. I know it's a little bit doom and gloom. I'm ranting a little, but it's just probably the feeling I'm sure many fans are feeling as well.
Oh, totally. And the other aspect to this is, I'm sure that there's going to be a court procedure happen over the coming weeks. Clearly, the Rebels and the directors are on the hook there, I think, unless there's something that we're not privy to at this point in time. But from a broadcast perspective, it'll be really interesting to see what happens. Rugby Australia is going to be deep into conversations over the next couple of months around what does this look like for the next broadcast cycle, which starts in 26. Does the removal of the Rebels change the regulations for next year, which is the final year of the deal with Nine and Stan? Similarly, with Sky losing a side, it means that there's one less team. There's probably going to be an extension of the draw in the regular season, I would imagine, but there's some serious consequences perhaps that this Rugby Australia needed, from my understanding, another 10 to 15 million minimum going forward to be able to be stable and to try to be able to cover all the areas it needs to now, which includes women's rugby, the Super Rugby Women's presence, which we will continue for Melbourne. But it'll be watch this space over the coming months, because the removal of the side generally doesn't bode well. So there's going to have to be some serious leadership, some very good political operating, manoeuvring from the powers that be. So yeah, it's a really crucial time. If you're a player, Matt, and you've got a quarterfinal, a maiden quarterfinals berth for the Melbourne Rebels this week, and you're heading to the Hurricanes, how do you think you're feeling? Does it help galvanise the squad, knowing that it's now or never? Could be the last time that you play amongst the entire team, or is it a slight distraction? How would you approach it, do you think?
Oh, look, I know how I would approach it. You would very much look for positives, and as you say, it's a first finals berth, and I'm sure that's how Kevin Foote and his staff will be approaching it. I feel like that, I feel like the players would be aware of that, but it would almost be a case of you'd feel like the coaches and people will be pulling the wool over your eyes a little bit. Like, you understand that they're trying to motivate you. You understand that, and they've been really overt with their messaging about being the best Rebels team ever, and they've done that by getting to the finals, and they should be extremely proud of that. But mate, I don't know. I don't know if I'm just getting old and soft now. I really feel like that's it's yeah. Like this last week, we've been the players would have been told on Thursday. So what does that look like? It looks like on the weekend, all right, you play the game, go to Fiji, come back. Monday, you've probably got your partner, your friends going, we got to look for leases, in Brisbane, in New South Wales. You get managers calling you on Tuesday about which club you want to go to. On Wednesday, you're having a look overseas. Like, it's the distractions for me. It's much too big in that sense, and to expect or to think that they can put a performance and beat a team like the Hurricanes at home is. Look, God, I'll be rooting for him, but I think it's far too daunting. It's going to be a huge challenge.
Some of these players are going to have the game of their lives, and I really hope that people like Taniela Tupou really stand up and deliver, because he was paid a lot of money to go down there. And have we seen the best of him this year? Probably not, off the back of a couple of injuries last year. But you would like to think that with the Wallabies around the corner, that all those players that are on the fringe, that they see this as an opportunity to further their own case. But you're right, it's going to be daunting at Hurricanes team, and the pack that they've got now with guys like Asafa Umur who's back, and you just see how much his barnstorming runs in the fringes last week, and he's just back to his absolute best after missing the previous 5-6 weeks.
Yeah, and it's a tale of two sides in the sense that you look at the Hurricanes, they have looked so physical and dominant up front all year, and the Rebels have had just this nothing that they can control. They've had this baggage off field that has been extremely distracting. It really is. You're comparing apples and oranges in terms of how how teams have been able to prepare, how much the national union has allowed them to prepare, because there's been no clarity all year for the Rebels, and a lot of credit has to go to the coaching staff, the leaders in the group, to get them to the finals is a huge effort. I think you'll see some interesting selections from Joe Schmidt. I think he'll understand that it's been a really difficult year, and I think, in my view, I think he'll pick a lot of those guys who may not have performed as well as you would have hoped, but him knowing that maybe he can get them in a new environment, and that shift mentally can really get more out of his players. So I think, there's definitely a lot to play for, but I think you'll see a bit of selection flexibility from Joe Schmidt.
Interesting. Okay, so the Blues and the draw, I think we know which way this is heading. If there's anything but a Blues victory, you'd be seriously surprised. As much as the draw have been phenomenal to watch throughout the season, particularly at home, they still just can't win on the road, and that's the long and the short of it at the moment. So good luck to them. The Brumbies and the Highlanders, look, we haven't necessarily thought much of the Highlanders this year, but knockout footy can be different at times. But I'd imagine that the Brumbies at home, yes, it's a trip back from Perth, which you'd know more about than me, how difficult that can be to be able to adjust slightly different time zones and so forth. But you'd imagine that the Brumbies at home are going to be way too strong.
Yeah, I'll definitely pick them. I think that it will be different in the sense that if you think of last year, the Brumbies sent out a kind of a weakened team to Perth, knowing that they had the game to come back for. This time, with potential top two finish, the Brumbies sent their best team out there, and then as it became evident, they started pulling a couple of guys here and there. So there'll be a few challenges. I think that they're a strong and robust, resilient enough team to overcome that. I think they'll be too strong for the Highlanders. the Brumbies have always fancied themselves against the Highlanders purely based off their set piece, in particular the maul, and it's kind of been, that's kind of how they've built their game. And I think you look Canberra a bit cold, it could suit them.
That being said, Ethan de Groot, Jermaine Ainsley, they'll probably have a different opinion on what we've just said there. And we know that the Brumbies scrum still not quite there. Another injury to Blake Shop. Fingers crossed James Slipper's back from injury, but we'll see. It was always going to be a couple of weeks. So it'll be a race against time for him. That is the one area I think the Highlanders can really go after the Brumbies and try to keep it tighter and just scrum and then maybe work towards penalties and yellow cards. But, yeah, otherwise, it does seem simple enough, but we know that Aussie rugby hasn't always been able to win matches without a functioning scrum.
Yeah, I agree. I do think this is a better Brumbies team than in previous years. I think this is a potential banana skin in the sense that, maybe the Brumbies' way of winning in the past would have more suited this game. Home final against a Kiwi opposition who are a bit more expansive. That being said, I really do feel this team is an improved side. There might be a few, teething issues at the start, but I think, Noah's kicking well enough. I think they've got a lot of danger off turnover ball. Albeit, the scrum hasn't been great, I think it will at least achieve parity on the weekend.
All right, end of the regular rounds. And I just thought maybe it's not a bad exercise to come up with what we think is a Super Rugby team of the competition. So players from right across the competition, not just Australian focused, because I think in many ways, if you've done really well for Super Rugby, you might not necessarily end up playing for the Wallabies anyway. Like we know that Alan Alatoa, who's only just recently come back, isn't necessarily going to be he's going to be, the tight head for the Wallabies, undoubtedly, I think. So let's go through it. And there's going to be a couple of talking points and controversial ones, I reckon. But if
hopefully
we were to work our way...
I was just going to say, hopefully we can disagree on something because last week, it was so boring.
I'm sorry I put you to sleep, Matt.
I apologise.
I'll tell you what, though, your team, which I know my boss Tony Harper ended up running on the website, and it did a lot of numbers. There was a lot of interaction, a lot of people talking about selections, and more often than not, I think people actually agreed with. We'll say you, but probably us. But
no, let's go us, mate. This is a team thing at the Raw.
Let's start it off though. Loose head prop is probably not a position that you and I know anything about, but
that's number one.
That is number one.
I think so.
Yeah. I'm glad we've nailed that aspect.
Yeah,
I'm going to just put someone up because I just think that it's a no-brainer for me. I like Xavier Numea. He's done a good job for the Hurricanes. He's played regular minutes. From an Australian perspective, there's not too many options. The Fijians have actually had a pretty good set piece and a reasonable scrum, but I can't go past Ofa Tu'ungafasi at loose head prop. Joe Moody's had some time there. Tamati Williams at times was up front as well. George Bauer's been pretty good, but for me, Ofa Tu'ungafasi.
Yeah, and we've started strong. I agree. He's an experienced campaigner who you just kind of trust. And in those positions, there might be some positions later on in the numbers that we might throw a little bit of a Hail Mary, but up front, I think, strong and stable. And a Blues team that's really been characterised by their physicality this year, which is different from previous years. So I think, credit has to go to guys like him.
Yeah, the only other person I probably should have put in there, Ethan de Groot. He's been quality, but I think given that he's playing for the Highlanders, it's probably just played against him. They're just not quite there at the moment. What about hooker? Who would you have up front wearing the number 2 jersey?
Yeah, look, you mentioned him earlier in the show. Asaf Alma has been great, and I think he was a guy like Taniela, where there were some YouTube clips of him early on, and you thought, oh, this guy is going to be Player of the Year, within a few years, and it's nice to see him playing. without injury, and once again, a part of a team whose scrum has been amazing at the Hurricanes. I think from Australian perspective, Matty Fessler has been great. But yeah, for me, it's Safa Elmore.
Yeah, so I know you're a big Tavita Cannavaro fan. I had him kind of in the top 3 mix. Ricky Riccitelli, I feel it's been really quality as well for the Canes. For the Blues, rather, having moved from the Canes. But yeah, I agree. Asafa Moore, he missed a chunk there in the back end, but he's come back on the weekend and hasn't missed a beat. Okay, tight head prop, Taniela Tupou, Alan Alatoa are the Aussie kind of options that you'd probably think. Jeffrey Tumonga Allen.
Yeah, I'd be mentioning the Queenslanders from an Australian point of view. I can't remember which side of the scrum Penny Ravai is on, but him and Tumonga Allen, these guys have been. Yeah, these guys have been, for me, have actually been the more impressive players from this side of the Tasman.
I think you're probably right. Penny Ravai mainly on the loose head side. From New Zealand, I'm just going to go Fletcher Neal. What he did to a couple of sides over the last month or two, particularly that Brumbies scrum, he just demolished. I'm going, Fletcher Neal. His quality, and some of the stat numbers around what he's been lifting in the gym are outrageous.
It's silly, isn't it? Yeah, it's silly. And look, in a team that struggled, their scrum has been predictably good, and he's the kind of the leader of that. So yeah, I think he's been good as well. So I'll agree with you there. I clearly got Penny Ravai the wrong side of the scrum, so I don't really know what I'm talking about in the front row.
What about the second row? It's probably another area that we don't know too much about, but is there any Aussies that would feature in and amongst some of the guys like your Tupou Byers, your Patrick Tuipulotus, or do we just stick with them?
Look, I think you probably stick with them, bearing in mind that Lucan was probably hamstrung by a foot injury. I thought he was performing pretty well along with Josh Cannon in the row there, but he definitely, for me, would have been would have been an honourable mention. But yeah, look, I think Patrick Tuipulotu has been another guy, up front for the Blues who has been awesome. He's clearly a big leader there. But there's been, it's probably an area that most of our best players are overseas, unfortunately. But yeah, it's unfortunate. I think you're probably looking at Tupou. You're probably looking at Patrick Tuipulotu.
Okay, back row. Surely there's going to be a couple of Aussies that feature in amongst this. Let's go to the number 7 position first up, and we'll go 6 and 8 after. I've got Fraser McWright. I just think, once again, awesome. He needs to transfer that super stuff to the Test international arena at some point. But who would you go?
Yeah, look, I think Fraser's been amazing, and I want to get an Aussie in there, but I'm going to go Billy Harmon. I think he's been exceptional in a team that's probably struggled a little bit down south in New Zealand there. His ball carrying ability, his leadership around the park, I think he's been immense. I do agree with you that Fraser's been awesome as well. And look, I think he will transfer it to Test. So, he's developing as a player, and I think he's a guy who will be a very close second. But yeah, I'm going Billy Harmon.
Okay. The other one that I would have in there is Dalton Papali'i. I just think his quality. There's probably a handful that we.
And a huge play on the weekend, saving that try, and he was, he's a guy who I think will be starting for the All Blacks later in the year, and he'll be playing in those bigger games. But yeah, for me, Billy Harmon.
Okay, let's go to the other flanker position, blindside flanker. I'm going Bobby Valentini. I know that he's featured at 8 as well, but he's been at 6 for a fair chunk of the year when Charlie Cale's been around. I just think physicality, everything, he's continued from that last year where he was the John Eales medalist.
Yeah, and he's been our best player for a while, in my view. Him and Probably Marika from a Wallabies point of view, and then Super Rugby. I think fair credit to him. He's been great this year. He's been first phase off the line out, off the back of the scrum at various points in time. He's been incredible, and I think he's a player who opposition teams really look at and go, "Oh shit, how are we going to get two guys on him?" Because he's such a strong carrier, and I assume that's probably going to lead to our next. And our next one at 8, Hoskins Tutu, he's been immense.
Yeah, you're not wrong. I was just almost tossing up Aiden Iosi from the Hurricanes. He's been thereabouts the last couple of years. He's emerged, but this year's just taken his game to a new level. He's been outstanding. But I think Tutu just edges him because he's come up with some match-winning plays, tries, left, right, centre, and that maybe just gives him the extra bit of cream on top.
Yeah, and another guy who maybe traditionally in the Blues, you would have thought of him as a very lateral type of player, but I think Vern Cotter's got them going route one a lot, and he's risen to the occasion. I remember when he first came on the scene, you were looking at this guy who was picking from 8 and then kicking the ball out like he was just incredibly skillful. But he's managed to add some kind of depth to his game in that sense. And look, Matt, if we were doing a player of the competition, he'd be right up there for me.
All right, halfback. This one might be difficult because a couple of halfbacks have gone down with injury throughout the season. Guys like your Cam Roy guards. I don't know if I can pick an Aussie 9 just yet. You can't pick a Frank Lamani because he missed half the year with his stupid elbow to Josh Cannon, but maybe TJ Perinara.
Yeah, it is an interesting one. I think it's going to be, unfortunately, the east side of the Tasman. I think we've had some decent seasons from our guys, but even the Kiwis have been very much in the halves, maybe not as razzly as you usually expect that, and it's been kind of cool seeing TJ Perinara play so well, considering his injury, and then considering he was behind Roygaard, and then the injuries opened up another kind of avenue for him to make his case, and credit to his character. So look, I'm going to go with TJ. I think he has been really good. I think actually Moana and Fiji have actually been pretty decent at halfback this year as well. But it's probably been a year where we've Aaron Smith's gone. We're not really 100% sure. We're comparing everyone to Anton Dupont. It's not as clear cut.
Well, the fact that the 9s for both the All Blacks and the Wallabies isn't clear cut this year goes to show. It could be any one of 3 or 4 different halfbacks. I think Jake Gordon's had a good year for the Tars. He's brought himself back into Wallaby calculations. Good to see Ryan Lonergan running the ball a little bit over the weekend against the Force. He needs to do more of that, in my opinion, to take his game to the next level. 10. Are we going to go past? Does Noah Lolosio, is he been Australia's best 10? Is he going to wear the number 10 jersey for the Wallabies, or is it another Kiwi?
He's been our best 10, definitely. He's been all round our best 10. Look, God, it's hard because then you look. It's another position, I think, other than Damien McKenzie. Your 10's been quite an interesting one with Richie Mo'unga leaving, with Bowden Barrett leaving. You've had a little bit of a void being filled by a few guys. Stephen Perifetta was injured for a while. You've had some young guys at the Highlanders come through. So, look, I think. if I was picking the team, I'd be putting Damien McKenzie at fullback. But I think the fact that he's been playing 10 for the Chiefs and the role he plays for that team, you can see so much rests on him. I'd be going Damien McKenzie at 10 for me. But yeah, definitely I think Noah has been our best 10 in Australia.
All right, a midfield combination, a 12 and a 13. I'm going to... Well, you actually, we spoke about it for about a minute before jumping on the pod, that this was going to be something that we spoke about. You came up with Tamati Tua. Is that your choice, or have you going to swing to a Geordie Barrett?
Yeah, no, I'm going to go Tua because Yeah, this is a Super Rugby Team of the Year. So I think it's merit based, and I think in a backline he could easily be overshadowed, by a Noah on his inside, or a Lenny on his outside, and the dangerous back three that they've got with Tom Wright at fullback there. But he's been the best back, and in a Brumbies team who have been characterised by their broken field play, by their defence up front. And for me, he's been the best 12 this year.
I think he edges out like a Quinton Pyre as well, who's been quality. But he's also come off the bench at times, and he was even on the bench, I think, on the weekend. So 11 games, he's missed a couple. So, yeah, I agree. Tua's been outstanding, and without him, they've struggled with the physicality natures of it. He's come off the bench once or twice, and they've just missed that impetus that he provides.
Yep, definitely. And playing 12 is a really interesting position. You've kind of got to be a jack of all trades in that sense. You've got to be able to pass, kick, run, tackle, and he's done the physical stuff really, really well, and it's provided a really nice balance to Noah and to Tom Wright. I'd maybe picking him.
What about Hunter Paisami? He's another guy that we've spoken a lot about.
Yeah.
Is he there?
Yep, he's my Wallaby 12. He's definitely my Wallaby 12. He's been a very, very good performer. I just think Tua's been his role with the Brumbies and his influence on guys outside him has been amazing. Once again, it is an interesting one because it's a Super Rugby Team of the Year, not necessarily a Anzac team to play the Lions or whatever. But yeah, I'd be going Tua, off his performances thus far.
All right, 13. That list it's always an interesting one because guys can at times be interchangeable between 12 and 13 or come off the bench. Felipe Duncan, who I think's been really impressive for the Rebels. I think Lenny Katau's had moments, maybe not quite as strong this year, perhaps because of Tua, who's perhaps overshadowed him a little bit. Josh Fluke's been quality for the Reds. Maybe for me, I think Anton Leonard-Brown I'm going to pick, but I don't know if we'll be aligned there.
Yeah, look, it is a hard one because, Proctor, Down-Goona has been amazing. And once again, his influence on the Rebels and their ability to slow that ball down out wide has been huge. I really want to pick someone like a Hunter or, at 13. Yeah, I'm struggling with this one. I am struggling with this one because then once again, you look at someone like Rico, there's a plethora of choices. Lenny Ikitau's the 13 for me at Wallabies, but has he been the best 13 in Australia? I don't know. I've really enjoyed watching, guys like Fluke, have some really, really good performances and seeing them grow. So I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm thinking a Proctor. I'm thinking a Ioane. It's a difficult one.
All right, maybe I'll be the deciding vote between those two, Proctor or Ioane. I'm going to go Proctor. I think Ioane's missed a fair bit of game time this year, and he's just been not quite as lethal as he has in the past. On the two wings, I'm going to lock one in there automatically. Severis, probably the only outstanding player in that Crusaders backline, just continues to score tries for fun.
Definitely, and he's a guy so easy, particularly as an outside back, to struggle in a team that's not doing great. And he's been immense. He really has. He's definitely picked for the All Blacks. He'll be starting, in my view. On the other wing, I reckon I genuinely think Corey Toole's got to be mentioned. I think teams look at him and see how dangerous he is. You saw Tom Wright on the weekend absolutely shin a kick that it definitely didn't go where it was meant to, and Corey Toole just somehow makes it look like it was a perfect kick from Righty. And I'll be picking him. God, actually, you got to mention the junkyard dog. Surely he'd be up there for talking a merit-based 15.
Well, yeah, that's true. What about from the Drua? You'll probably help me out with the pronunciation.
Yeah, Ravi Tamanda. He particularly in the early parts of the season, he was definitely the best right hand winger. I think if we're going, Sevu Reece, I'm still going Corey Toole. I think he provides something. I think he provides. I think Ravi Tamanda's probably been one of the best players, but I think Corey Toole just provides something, that we haven't seen from an Australian perspective for quite a while. He's been real dangerous.
The other couple of names that I've really enjoyed watching this year, Nanai Satoro. I think he's improved his game out of sight for the Chiefs.
Good left kick as well.
Yeah, the other one, Caleb Clark. I think he too has been so explosive, bulldozing, and I'm going to go Caleb Clark. I don't know. I know that Clark doesn't always feature on the right wing, but stuff it. I'm just going to have him and Sevu Reece as my two wingers.
Yeah, and look, if it's a test match, you're picking Caleb Clark. Once again, I just think I've been so excited by Corey Toole, and I think, I think he just has a different element to all the other wingers at the moment. Bit of X factor.
He's a try scorer, isn't he? Okay, fullback. I think Ruben Love's been brilliant for the Hurricanes. I am going to go Tom Wright though.
Yeah, 100%. We started the same, we went the same. He's been amazing this year, and he probably listens to the pod now because I've been talking about him so much. But no, he's been incredible, and as I said, I've said it a few times now, his leadership in that team, the amount of times. One of the guys scores and as Noah's lining up the kick and they pan, to the team talk. And usually this is where, your halfbacks, your tens are talking and you've got your 15. He's really, in there. And I really hope Joe Schmidt uses him, one at 15, but two as a vice captain of some sort. I think he's someone who thrives with responsibility and he needs it and he steps up to it.
So a little bit of news about the Aussie Sevens. We mentioned it earlier, but final gold medalists in Madrid. They got to the final off the back of a simply outstanding semi-final victory over the Black Ferns. 2 tries in the last minute, the second of which was deep into stoppage time. Great hands, great communication. Charlie Caslick featuring heavily amongst it. And then an unbelievable kick from Tia Hines to send Australia through. It was clutch. It was extraordinary. And that's outstanding momentum leading into an Olympic game. So well done to the women. The men struggled somewhat, but Antoine Dupont and France, too good in the men's side of things. Look, the other thing that we want to get to, the Wallabies, Joe Schmidt, just giving a tiny insight into some of the people he's thinking about come the July test matches. It's not an official squad. It's very much a train on. And each time an Aussie team gets knocked out, there'll be some more players added to it. But with the Force and with the Waratahs being eliminated, you're seeing the likes of Kurtley Beale, Nick White, Paley Kunzel, Hamish Stewart, Carla Jazana, Isaac Rodder from the Force, who are going to be asked to come over to Sydney, train alongside guys like Tane Edmund, Dylan Peach, Charlie Gamble, Jake Gordon, Miles Amatezero, Laney Gleeson, and Lalakai Feketi. Maybe a Tristan Ryler could be featuring in amongst it as well. Matt, off the top, probably the big news, Kurtley Beale back. Someone like a Mark Nwanganita misses out, which is what we kind of spoke about and thought it last week when we predicted we named what we thought should be the Wallabies team going forward.
Yeah, look, I think if Mark was here, 2025, you'd maybe see it worthwhile. If he was playing his absolute socks off, then you'd see him in that squad as well. But I think, unfortunately, it's probably been a year where he hasn't been in his best form. We've seen him, miss out of the squad entirely from a Waratahs perspective. So I think that makes sense. I think it's smart bringing a guy like Kurtley in. What he can add to the group. He's a guy who's very much just kind of got back into it again. And so I think Joe Schmidt might just, get his eyes on Kirtley and just see, okay, can I get more out of him, and make some decisions there. I think it's really interesting to see Charlie Gamble in there as well. I think it's a guy who, you talk about your on-ballers, and Fraser McWright very much sticks out, but tactically you're probably starting to look at Gamble. You're starting to look at some of the guys down at the Brumbies who can be on-ballers, but you may be starting to see where Joe Schmidt realises, he needs some balance in that back row, and it can't just be all, brute force.
Oh, I think Miles Hamilton-Zero, another one who's probably there more of a development. He's going to be a Wallaby going forward. Maybe not ready for it yet, but I think on the spring tour this year, I would be bringing him in there and just allowing him to be around that group and what are the standards, et cetera, et cetera. But the other one that probably raised a couple of eyebrows, Taine Edmund. He didn't even get a minute on the weekend against the Reds. He's come off the bench a couple of times recently. Him being there, I like Taine Edmund. I think he's a good player. He's missed a couple of big moments off the tee, or a charge down field goal in Fiji. What do you think? Is he close to it at all, do you think? Or the fact that guys like Tommy Lyon, Carter Gordon, Noah Lolosio, Jack Debrasini, these guys are going to be featuring in the finals. Do you think that Taine can make the next step up?
Yeah, I do. I don't think it's a difficult one. I think him and Tom Liner were probably very much in that similar bracket where they're obviously haven't yet played for Australia, but they could be around there. Once again, I really think this is Joe Schmidt. Get him, get some closer eyes on him, see what he's like. Was he dare say, in inverted commas, a victim of poor performances from the Waratahs as a whole? And was he shouldering too much of that load? And is that where you saw some, bits that maybe he didn't excel as much as he would have liked, or was it another explanation? So, look, I don't think he's in my depth chart. He's not ahead of guys like Carter Gordon or Donaldson or Noah. But I think he's a good footy player. He clearly can run a team quite well, and I think that's probably enough for a guy like a Joe Schmidt just to have a deeper look.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. Hamish Stewart, good reward for him. So too Bailey Kunzel, and Bailey can kick goals. He can cover multiple positions. He's a guy that I've been intrigued by all year. The fact that he cut off his locks probably didn't help in terms of standing out like he might have in the past, but I just wonder whether or not if he can make an impression, if he can force himself into that squad, knowing that it's pretty important to have guys that can kick goals that aren't just your 10s, particularly if you're going to go someone like a Dono or a Carter who have struggled at times. Now, Dono's been better recently, but have struggled at times goal kicking.
Yeah, and I think I think that I've mentioned it a few times. I think the trend now, particularly off the bench, is guys who can cover multiple positions. So to if you're picking a 6-2 bench and one of those back positions is a halfback, say, you need someone who can really Adam Ashley Cooper step in from 12 out. And Kunzel, we saw him at the Brumbies play a bit more in the midfield, and he's now a little bit out wider. Like, he is clearly a really skilled footballer, and I think you start opening up avenues in that sense. And you mentioned Dylan Peach earlier. I think Eddie spoke about it last year about having these guys who can play back row and centre, but he didn't really back it up in selection. But I think we might start seeing that nowadays. In the next few years. I really think Joe Schmidt might put an emphasis on the pack, and then some backs who can kind of cover everywhere.
Yeah, well, Dylan Peach, I think he's been really, really good this year. Hasn't once or twice he's mucked up a try scoring opportunity, but he's quality. He's physical. He's tall. He's good in the air. I think he's a good player. We'll find out more this time next week with whether or not there's a whole chunk of players that are going to be joining these probably 15, 16, 17 guys at the moment on the east coast of Australia. But until then, Matt, always a pleasure. You get back to the roasting of the beans tomorrow, and I look
mate.
forward to hearing a few more
That sounds a
tales
bit
around
X-rated. Yeah. I think au revoir is the correct thing. Enjoy, mate, and yeah, what a weekend! I'm very, very pumped. I know it's only Monday, but yeah, some awesome games coming up.
Yeah, always a good time of year. Alrighty, thanks very much for tuning in, and look forward to doing it this time next week. Cheers.